everybody. Welcome to Peaches and Powerbombs. We have a special guest today. This is someone we've been wanting on our show since the first day. And with our Overcoming the Odds series, I felt like he was the perfect guest to have on. Um, a lot of you may know him from Sports Kita, um, Pancakes and Power Slams, among other various projects that he has done over the years. And fun fact, he is the reason why Marie and I are kind of together now. So we wanted to welcome Dr. Chris Featherstone to our show. Welcome.
Yay.
Welcome. He brought his own
I count
soundtrack,
the
guys.
sound effects,
Nice.
ladies and gentlemen.
we got quite a few, but like we kind of made this pact with everybody else. Okay, we're not going to take your stuff.
It's all good. It's a big shareable community here, so it's all fun.
I've stolen some stuff from Tom. I'm not gonna lie.
Hey, he's got a plethora of stuff to steal from. So
So how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm busy, super busy, but super happy to be here. Both of you are gems in the pro wrestling journalism community,
Thank
and
you. That means a lot.
it was cool to mentor Laura for a little bit in the writing game, and that was pretty cool. And Tina's continued support of my all of my endeavors is awesome. So thank both of you for inviting me in, and I'm looking forward to talk about some stuff.
All right. Yeah, same here. That means means a lot. Thank you. So
Before we start with our questions real quick, I do want to thank you because the past the first 7-8 months of this year was really hard on me because I had a lot of health issues and it took them a really long time to figure out what was going on. I had a bad gallbladder. It was dead in the water, needed to be taken out. And, when you're having gallbladder pain, you're sitting up late at night a lot and you can't sleep.
I've had gallbladder surgery too, so I understand totally.
Because Pancakes and Power Slams is on at 11:40 p.m. That was on Tuesday night. It really helped me through some stuff. So
thank you. I as someone who's also had gallbladder surgery, I totally understand your pain that you were going through, and just continue just annoyance, and I understand. So I thank you so much for just supporting my stuff, and super interactive on my shows, and yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And listening to my rants about pro wrestling.
All good.
So speaking of pancakes and power slams, the number one question I wanted to know, and it was the first one I wrote down, was how did you get started in all of this pro wrestling journalism?
Thank you for asking. So, I started. Oh man, what is this? 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this had to be about 2009 or 10.
Okay.
I was working at the YMCA at that time, and as a trainer, as a fitness coach and a trainer, and I was like, you know what? I've always had a big mind to dream big and to like. I'm more of a visionary, not a visionary and a revolutionary like Seth Rollins, but I'm more of a vision. Well, I guess more. I guess I can be a revolutionary too in certain ways, but I'm a visionary. I'm like, there's a difference between a dreamer and a visionary. A dreamer just have a bunch of dreams, just kind of like in a big pot. A visionary knows how to take action to those dreams, and I've always had that ability to do that. And I was like, you know what? I've always also had a mindset of like, what's the difference between me and that person on Sports Illustrated? Like nothing. I mean, like I'm confident enough in my skill set to know that I have something to offer, and um, that's what happens. And what happened was around 2009 or 10. I was like, man, I don't know. I have zero connections. I don't know how in the world I'm going to get into this journalism game when it comes to pro wrestling. And so I started Googling, like, I know I was a good writer, um, but I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna get into this journalism game. So I started Googling areas or ways to start submitting articles. And I found a place called Hub Pages. And so I started writing weekly articles on Hub Pages. And I wrote a column and I called it Yes, No, Maybe, and it was a weekly column about Raw. And I would write it every like Tuesday, right after Raw, and I would do yes, no, maybe. So weeks after weeks, that generated some steam. Yes, no, maybe, and I used that as a big leap to submit to work for Bleacher Report. And so
Okay.
I used all the articles. I was like, okay, here I go. Here's my stuff. Here's my yes, no, maybe stuff that I wasn't getting paid a dime for. And so I was grinding and grinding, but I still had a big vision. I had a big picture goal, and I understand that there's work to get there, and not to quit or give up. And so I sent admitted that to Bleach Report. I got hired on a Bleach Report as like a regular columnist. My writings and my stuff, like within probably weeks, it started to generate so many reads that they made me a feature columnist within the first month of writing for the Bleach Report. And then just that started to get steam, and that led to Wrestling Inc. And I wrote there for about 6 years. And that led to other endeavors, like I wrote for What Culture. I wrote for Russell, Russell Zone. I wrote for just a bunch of different, sheets basically. Pro wrestling.com. I wrote for them, I believe. Yeah. One of them pro wrestling's sheet sites. Um, and just a few, like probably four, 3 or 4 or 5 of them, just to get my work out there. And so
Mhm.
basically, after being a feature columnist for a Bleach Report for about 3.5 years or so, I wanted to endeavor higher. So I used my, all of my information from, the work that I've done, my portfolio, and I sent it to Sports Illustrated. And I got brought in to do some freelance work for Sports Illustrated. I got a number of articles there that I wrote freelance. And then I was like, okay, so I want to do more and continue to build up my portfolio. So I use all that work to submit to Fox Sports, and ended up doing some freelance stuff for Fox Sports. And yeah, so that allowed me to um, erect my own, get hired on by a company, and start my own site from scratch, which was the floor seat, which you got brought on to write
Mhm.
for. Same thing as Tom Clark. I brought him on too, and so yeah, so all that just gathered and gathered, and I just got a whole
Yeah,
plethora full of stuff. Wrote for the Inquisitor for a couple of years, and so all that just kind of gathered, and it got me to an ability to no longer get paid to write, but get paid to talk about wrestling nowadays. So that's where I'm at now.
that's awesome.
Thank you.
So you, how is it? You talk about all of these things that you were able to do and just keep building yourself up. Um, how hard is it to just take it step by step though? Because some people will just look at the ultimate goal. I want to be here, but
Mhm.
they don't know how to do the little tiny steps in between that. So, what advice would you give to someone when they want to reach here, but they're trying to start at the bottom and, start on those tiny baby steps?
Yeah, yeah. 3 words: celebrating phases. People get too caught up in lofty goals, and that's with anything. I mean, as a psychology doctor, as a therapist, that's one of the things. Because if you think about it from just a psychological standpoint, it's a dopamine boost if you celebrate in small phases. A lot of people can get stressed out by having such this lofty goal, and I'm not making it, and then I get so discouraged, and then I just give up. That happens a lot with many things. I mean, with fitness, goals.
Yeah.
People have their New Year's resolutions, and then within a few weeks they stop. I've worked in fitness for 10 years, and that happened all the time, every year. You know,
Right. Right.
and but it's a lofty goal. It's like, yeah, I want to lose 50 pounds by the summertime. I want to get my beach body right. I'm like, that's cool, but celebrate the 1 pound loss, celebrate the 2 pound loss, celebrate the half pound loss. You know what I mean? Like those things, when you focus on those things so much, you're like looking at step by step in front of you. And by the time you look up, you're like, oh, I didn't even know I was this far, this close to the goal, right? And so
Right.
that's how our mind should work when we think about goal setting. It shouldn't be too much about the lofty goal that comes with that. Although it's good to have that in place, but just celebrating phases, celebrate those small steps. That's how I became a doctor. You know what I mean? Like I had to. It's like, hey, guess what? So you have a big book to write that's 140 pages and 5 chapters. Go. You know what I mean? Like, uh, okay. You know what I mean? Like, and so every time I would complete a chapter in my dissertation, I took myself out to eat. Every
Yeah.
time I would take myself out to eat. Every time I get an approval, I would celebrate it. I would go out, get something to eat, get a nice steak, you know what I mean? And
Heck
uh,
yeah.
steak and
Yeah.
potatoes and just celebrating phases. And by the time that came, I, completed my dissertation and became a doctor. So celebrating phases is such a vital, vital, vital part to accomplishing goals.
I had to write that down because I was like, oh, that's a good journal topic.
Nice.
um, so when we were working together on the floor seat, I remember I had just found out about my severe depression, and I was, it was a whole new learning process for me. And I remember you mentioning that you worked in mental health, and I always remembered that. So when we actually started this and we wanted to do like overcoming the odds and stuff, I always thought about you because, I remember how graceful you were with me when I'm like all over the place or whatever. And so being like you're the jack of all trades, literally. So but you had a lot going on in regards to the dissertation too. I say
Mhm.
dissertation, I don't know why, but so I know at one point you had a back injury you were working through.
Still, yeah.
Mhm.
Oh
Mhm.
wow,
Yeah.
yeah, those are always rough.
Mhm.
Despite your back injury and you were doing several projects in addition to working on the doctorate, how other than celebrating in phases, because you kind of already touched on it, how were you able to push through all those hurdles because you had so much on your plate, it seems like.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I realized that I want to leave a legacy, and I would rather leave a legacy by becoming a doctor and making sure that my family's taken care of, than jumping from job to job. And just by the time I'm 60, I'm like, hey, so look back and be like, hey, I worked good, I worked hard. You know what I mean? But I don't have much to I don't have much left, out of that. So I didn't want to do that, and I only have one opportunity to do that. I only have one life to create a legacy, and so legacy is really big for me. I was growing up in a very impoverished neighborhood, a very impoverished neighborhood. We will call it the hood, right? And so spend 17 years of my life there, and then moved into another, very high risk neighborhood. And so I realized that I wanted to pay it forward for my community, and I wanted to pay it forward for my family now for sure. And 3 kids. And so, I want to make sure that I'm creating that type of legacy. So stuff like that was huge motivators. Of course, my faith, huge, huge motivators for me to realize that the further I get to the goal, it wouldn't make any sense for me to turn back. You know what I mean? So it's like already the goal is in mind. I already want it. So if I go back, that doesn't make me not still want the goal. You know what I mean? It just
Yeah.
makes
Right.
me, it just hits the reset button. So I might as well keep going no matter how it feels, because the more I keep going, the more I'm closer to the goal. And if I'm already here, I mean, why am I going to quit now? So stuff like that and that type of mindset really gave me the ability to keep going and keep pressing on.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm going to kind of shift the conversation a little bit into the mental health space, but kind of still stay in wrestling too at the same time. I have kind of a weird question I want to ask you. Um, if you take a deep dive on how men and women are affected mentally and what, you know, we have different struggles
Mhm.
if you think about it. Kind of on the men's side, as far as what I can see, is that they're kind of dealing with the we don't talk about our feelings type
Mhm.
stuff. I'm the manly man. I'm tough. I'm big.
Yep.
Yada yada yada. Nothing gets to me, and you can't mess with me. And on the women's side, they're dealing more of with the body issues
Mhm.
and the body image issues. So if you think about professional wrestling through the years, if you really look at it, can it be a window into how our mental health affects each of us?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a couple things when it comes to professional wrestling that alarms me as a as a psychology doctor. One, how one, especially like 80s wrestling and like 90s wrestling, of course, with the Hogan, scandal, with the steroid scandal in the 80s, and stuff like that. Um, it's one of those things that body image was such a big deal, in
Mhm.
80s and 90s wrestling, that you had like people will literally get shot up all the time, and roided up all the time just because they wanted their spot. What I mean, they wanted to make sure that they don't lose their spot. So they wanted that Herculean body, and they want to keep, they were doing it by any means necessary. And most of them were, injecting steroids. So a lot of that stuff, it just comes down on your mental health, even from a hormonal standpoint. It affects you. So I know that you mentioned that women deal with image, stuff, and that's true. But from a pro wrestling standpoint, there is a lot of image stuff, on both sides, especially with the men, to deal with that. So it was and like Benoit, for instance, he's a prime case. I've written a lot about Chris Benoit from a psychological standpoint. I've even interesting. I was like, I I integrated so much pro wrestling in my psych studies, before on my road to my doctorate. And one of those things, I was talking about the Ocean method, which is the big five personality traits, and I wrote a big paper about Chris Benoit dealing with the big five personality traits. I'm actually working on putting that in ebook form right now.
Oh,
Spoiler
nice.
Wow.
alert. So, yeah, so it should be coming out soon. But yeah, just with Benoit, I've studied a lot about Benoit from a psychological standpoint. This guy, he was a big fan of the Dynamite Kid, and
Yeah.
he wanted to. He was a kind of a scrawny guy, what I mean, when he first started off, and he looked at Dynamite Kid. He was like, man, I want to be just like that. And he just started shooting up, shooting up, shooting up, taking pills and things like that. And one of his big things is that he didn't want to lose that form. He didn't lose that shape. Guerrero was real big on that too, as far as, because he was a smaller guy and he wanted to keep like a big, kind of a muscular stature. And it was a big thing in wrestling. It still is to an extent, to keep your place by looking the part.
Right.
As much as Tina knows how much, or Marie, Majestic Marie. That's your stage name, right?
Yeah.
uh, so Marie, she knows a lot, how much I criticize the business nowadays. That's because I've been a fan since like 1985. So I've been watching the business for 37 years, and I see now that there's just a lot. I'm a big story guy, story, story, story. But one thing I will credit is that the the emphasis on image isn't as strong as it used to be. And
Mhm.
it's not about keeping your spot because you look the part. And I can appreciate that from a psychological standpoint. I can appreciate that about modern day wrestling. Uh, on the other side, people want their spot by having holy crap moments and alluring the crowd by, you know, breaking and having a bunch of spots, which causes people to get concussed and break their legs and arms. But at the same time, they're not trying to inject themselves with, roids because of, policies nowadays. So I'm actually happy about that. So yeah, I think, to sum up your question, I think um, mental health does have a lot to do with professional wrestling to maintain an image and to keep your spot. That's a big thing too. Like I have many wrestlers that I've talked to, and they always talking about, man, people work injured because you want to keep your spot. You don't want to lose your spot. You don't want to lose your spot, and that takes a toll on you mentally because you're dealing with
Mhm.
so much pain. You don't want to leave because you're about to you got a world title push. You were told in a couple
Mhm.
months we're building to a push, but now I tore my Achilles, and oh man, let's just brace it up because this is my first
Mhm.
world title opportunity. I don't want to leave it, and now I'm dealing with the pain, which has a lot of mental, a huge mental toll. I
Mhm.
know
Yeah.
from my back, it takes a
Yeah.
huge mental toll on you. But you don't want to lose your spot. You know that you need to stay and rest and take some time with your family. But then if you get that title spot, there's more money, and it's tough.
Yeah.
It's a
It's tough
vicious
to
cycle.
yeah, it is a vicious cycle, yeah.
So yeah, the it seems like the whole life of a pro wrestler has a effect on your health because you're not only dealing with the 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 body image issues and the whole I can't talk about my feelings
Yep.
because I'm supposed to have this project onto people that I nothing affects me.
Mhm.
And but at the same time, you do all of that and you're broadcasting that everywhere, and then you still have to go to the hotel room or
Yep.
home or wherever alone, and it's all
Alone.
sitting on you. And
Exactly.
you're away from your family, you're away from your friends, and you're just it that the whole lifestyle has to be take a toll on people.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, it's difficult. And you said something very important there, Marie. You said something you said after the show, they go home or they go to the hotel typically alone, or they're driving, either alone to the next town or with someone else who's tired, who's like, another wrestler. So it's a type of companionship, but it's more of a phileo, type of brotherly love, not more of a eros, love that you share with, a spouse, you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
it's cool that, I'm one of the boys, but I just need a good hug right now because I'm in so much pain. You know what I mean? Like I need
Yeah.
a good hug from my spouse right now because I'm in so much pain that one of the boys can't really do. You know what I mean? So it's like
Mhm.
you deal with that, and then you're like you said. I mean, that's really big. You know, though going to the hotel alone, it just opens up a plethora of just
Mhm.
racing thoughts. I mean, I'm in so much pain. Let me get these pills. My spouse said that, I shouldn't be injecting something because my spouse knows that it's a bad idea, and she keeps telling me the same thing over and over and over, and I know it's not right, but I know I got in so much pain, and so I
Mhm.
just won't tell her. You know what I mean? So it's just, and then that's just another vicious cycle, and then it ends up to addictive behaviors. And
Mhm.
so, Kurt Angle, I'm actually friends with Kurt Angle, and he's talked about many times publicly about just getting to the point of just getting super addicted because he was dealing with so much neck pain, and that led to just really tough times in his marriage and parenting. And again, it's that vicious cycle that really, really affects your mental health.
Yeah, it's tough all around for wrestlers because they're
Mhm,
always what you call on,
mhm,
and when you had mentioned the spouse, it's kind of nice to have that person on the outside giving their perspective
Yeah.
on things. And with that, in recent years, there's been talk about mental health over pro wrestling mental health over the years, with Benoit, etc. Now, within recent years, notably, for me and Marie, Eddie Kingston's very open about his mental health. You've had people such as William Morrissey, Big Cass.
Mhm.
He's had his was public as well. More and more, you're starting to see these guys open up about this. It's kind of like a more of a it's more of a personal thing. I think that's one of the reasons why Marie and I are huge fans of Eddie Kingston, because it's like what he's saying, he gets it. That's us. It's
Mhm.
kind of like how you can relate to him.
Mhm.
So I feel like there's some sort of trend with that, and it's a way for people to relate, and it's real, and it's something that it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care who you are. Um, Others include Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair. So hearing that, I feel like not only it makes them look more human, but it just goes to show you, you know, the people that I mentioned have success in some way or another, but mental health will rear its ugly head and really take you down if you're not careful. So, um, as a doctor and all that, how do you feel about them being more open with it and trying to be a little more personable?
Yeah, well, as a pro wrestling critic, I'm a big fan of kayfabe. So it's like you can't tell anybody your business, right?
Mhm.
But at the same time, like beyond all of that, like this goes way beyond pro wrestling. I mean, it's like a whole different galaxy above pro wrestling. So it's like for the sake, forget pro wrestling, forget kayfabe. If you're really dealing with a lot of stuff
Mhm.
internally, pro wrestling can be on the back burner any day of the week if you're dealing with depression, right? So,
Mhm.
beyond all that, beyond wrestling, it's important that the human person, the human soul is being, taken care of. And the sense of relatability, especially with men, just from my studies and even from my profession, women, they do a good job. They'll do a much better job with being more open than men are. Men are full of we were just ego driven Neanderthals most of the time, knuckle dragging, Neanderthals, and saying, I'm big and bad. I've got all these guns. My mental health is my working out, which working out is definitely a good mental health tool as far as like dopamine, but
Mhm.
it's not. The therapy only goes as far as your workout sessions, but you it's really really important for male wrestlers to be more open, and so I appreciate like Morrissey and Kingston and things like that, because at the end of the day, y'all, it's sure there's characters, and again, I'm a big fan of kayfabe. There's characters, but at the end of the day, it's so cathartic to see a big celebrity wrestler. Like wrestlers are supposed to be superheroes, right? They're supposed to be
Mhm.
invincible superheroes. But you know what's so interesting about superheroes? Spider-Man had a kryptonite, right? So like he
Mhm.
wasn't afraid to show his moments of kryptonite. That's the whole narrative of Spider-Man, is that there were times where he was weak and he was down,
Mhm.
but the perseverance was that he was able to push through the setbacks, the times that it seems like he wasn't going to win. And that's what happens in so many, cartoon. I always call wrestling a comic book come to life, right? So, like, and the same thing when it comes to comic book stories. You have the narrative of the person, the superhero, he's fighting crime, but the really cool part of the story arc is when the superhero is being super tested. He's being beat
Mhm.
up and battered and bruised, and he's down and down and down, and all of a sudden, boom, he perseveres. He comes back, the comeback, right? The hot tag, so to speak. And it's like those moments really define a person.
Mhm.
And it's important to see that your superheroes are having moments of vulnerability, and
Mhm.
the comeback is where the inspiration is.
I actually just started dating and
Look
somebody
at you.
special. Yeah, and one of the things that I'm having to work on is vulnerability. So
Mm,
that really speaks to me in terms of just growing as a person. Another thing that I want to mention too, right quick, is when Eddie Kingston first mentioned his depression in a promo with Brian Danielson, it was very passionate, and I just remember crying
mm,
because it was just like, you know, it just spoke to me, and I feel like we're getting um it's a slow burn type of story, even though we want them to do more with Eddie.
mm.
But yeah, I just wanted to bring those couple of things up, and I really like the superhero comparison because that is so true, and I didn't even realize that until you brought it up. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Yeah, you said something interesting, and I'm not disagreeing with you by any ways. But you said that women are better at showing their of being more open,
Typically, not.
typically. But
Yeah, not. Yeah,
you know,
comparatively speaking.
we're all in our 30s, 40s here, so our generational upbringing was, you don't talk about it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So when you try to, I was accused of being a drama queen and all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
You're just trying to get attention. So it's been really hard for me to open up about things, and trying not to turn this into a therapy session.
Mm. Well, you got the right person on the show for that.
But yeah, Laura mentioned that Eddie Kingston promo, and she was actually the person who sent it to me, and she was like, "I'm crying," and at that time, I hadn't told her that I had depression or
Mhm.
anxiety. I didn't tell anybody really. I
Yeah.
I would just go and be by myself for a long time, and be like, "Oh, Tina, she's just in the room over there. Just leave her alone. She'll be fine." But I wasn't, and it took that to actually give me the courage. So, you know, seeing guys, because I know how men are too. They're very. It's hard for them to open up, and it was hard for me to open up. So seeing guys like Eddie and like Dax Harwood and them opening up about the things that they gave me the courage to open up about Matt. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point. You know, it's it's one of those things that with guys, like what I mean is that females are typically more expressive. Like, I'm happy, I'm sad type deal. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
guys don't even do that much. A lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
times, like guys don't even be like, oh, I'm sad. It's like kind of tough it up, buttercup. But shout out to women are typically more expressive, saying, I'm not feeling well. It even gets to that, like,
yeah,
I'm good. No, you're not good. You're just coughing. You know what I mean? No,
yeah,
I'm good. You know what I mean? No, no,
yeah,
you're not good. You know what I mean? Like you're just say I'm not feeling well. It's okay. Bravo, macho man. You know what I mean? Like it's not that big of a. Just say you don't feel okay. Just say I'm sick. You know what I mean? And guys, okay. Can I give you some chicken noodle soup? Like, women are just so nurturing. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
I love it. It's typically, hey, can I give you some chicken noodle soup? And he's like, no, I don't need any chicken noodle soup. I'm good. You know what I mean? And it's like, guys, black men actually are among the worst demographic to individually seek therapy, you know, and it's because of upbringing of, you don't want to tell
Mhm.
anybody your business. You know what I mean? Like, that's a big, big thing. And to your point, though, mental health across the board was taboo in men and women,
Yeah.
and so like saying that I battled depression, it doesn't matter male, female, it doesn't matter who you are across the board. That was a taboo because if you think about it, before like the 1960s, even from a historical standpoint, when people would go to jail for having psychiatric problems before the
Mhm.
advent of like psych wards, psychiatric wards and treatment facilities in the 60s and 70s. Like people would be jailed, to take them away from society. And then as the advent, they would be placed in facilities, but it was like uh, um, something that was permissible for jail time. If you think about it that way, like that's a real thing.
Mhm.
If you sit and think about it, if someone who were dealing with mental health issues were jailed, and it's like, what? That's the
Yeah.
that's the
Mhm.
craziest thing in the world. And like, from 60 years ago to now, it just started really, over the past
Mhm.
maybe 10 to 20 years to be
Yeah.
more embraced, because still there was still a stigma with someone who
Mhm.
said that they're dealing with mental health issues to be like, okay, well, just throw them in a psych ward. You know what I mean? Just throw them in a shrink. You know what I mean? Just because they say that they're dealing with depression. But it's like, man, that's just so not fair. Because, I tell my clients all the time, hey, we all deal with something. You were just strong enough to come to me and admit yours, so
Mhm.
thank you.
Yeah.
I thank my clients, you know what I mean? Because that takes a lot of strength. I always tell people like vulnerability and admitting stuff like that, that's not a sign of weakness whatsoever. That's a sign of strength. Because one, you're strong enough and bold enough to say, regardless of what anybody else thinks, I'm going to be open about what I'm dealing with for the sake of, getting interventions for myself, and then giving that other person who's reluctant, the
Mhm.
power and the strength to admit, okay, well, wow, Eddie Kingston said it. Well, I mean, like, okay, I feel a little bit more comfortable saying it myself. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
Right.
I think the admission of these things and the openness of this has really created a more of an embrace of community of like, okay, okay, I got some issues. Okay, I do too. Okay, so do I. You know what I mean? So basically, that's what we're building, and I love it. I think it's great. There's still, some pushback, in a lot
Yeah.
of ways, but at the same time, I do see some positive progression in that.
You bring up a good comment about, you know, people saying, "Okay, I'm going through it, and I'm going through it too, and I'm going through it too." When I got to meet Eddie back in March, sick as a dog through the whole thing because I was still dealing with my issues, but
Mhm,
my gallbladder issues. But I
mhm.
did I did have enough strength to go to my fan fest, and I'm really glad I did because he talked to me for about 10 minutes. If you've
Nice.
ever been to a fan fest, you don't usually get that much time with
Oh,
people.
okay. Nice.
And one of the things he told me, and I've heard him say this on videos too, that there's no such thing as normal,
Mm,
that everybody's going through something. And,
Mhm.
we're all here, you're not all alone. And I
mhm.
think that is probably one of the most powerful messages you can put out there.
Mhm.
Yeah, community is so important. I mean, like, and again, it's just like you don't want to be that person on an island and say, I got something wrong with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's so much more solace and security and say, hey, we've got something wrong with us. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot more security in that. And the more people are being open toward that, the more mental health is shifting from, oh, psych ward, throw them in the shrink, to, okay, I've got something. Okay, I'll admit it. I'm dealing with some things too, and I appreciate that progression. Like I said,
Mhm. Go ahead.
Okay. I have
Go
one
ahead,
more
and then I'll say
question.
mine.
Okay, I have one more question, and then I'll let Alora take over.
Mhm.
One of the things that you were talking about is your faith, and that's another part of it. Is if you are a person of faith, you're kind of looked at differently in the church. Like, why is Jesus not
Mhm.
enough for you? What do you have to say about, or whatever kind of faith someone might have? Your God's not enough for you. What do you
Yeah.
say to
Well,
that?
I'll speak personally as a devout Christian. Jesus was on the cross, and he said it's a phrase in Aramaic. He said, "Lima, lima, laba shabachthani," right?
Hmm.
Eli, 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 Eli means my
My
God,
God, my
Eli,
God.
Eli, lima shabachthani, right?
Why
Why
have you
have thou
forsaken me?
forsaken me? So he said that in Aramaic, Eli, Eli, lima shabachthani. So Jesus, which is God in flesh, according to Christian tradition,
Hmm.
um, he fell forsaken on the cross. He's God, right?
Yeah.
So if Jesus can feel a moment of weakness, right? And even before
Hmm.
that, in the Garden of Gethsemane,
Yeah.
he said, "If it be your will, let this cup pass," right?
Yeah.
He
And
was going through.
hmm
Go ahead, Marie.
well, and him kept going back to his disciples and saying, "Why are you asleep? Why are you
While
not
you're
praying
asleep.
with me?" So he just felt totally abandoned by everyone.
Abandoned. Exactly. And it's like he felt abandoned, he felt forsaken, he felt heavy. And he's like, and Jesus, I teach men's Bible study. And if Jesus is just such an example of everything that we go through. Hebrews 4:15 talks about that.
Yeah.
And so if someone can be an example of his human form, feeling weakness, feeling pain, feeling suffering. The smallest verse in the Bible is two words, and it's Jesus wept, right? And
Mhm.
so it talks about pain, suffering, agony, grief, those things Jesus experienced, and he's God. So who in the world am I to not experience those things if the person I serve, was an
Mhm.
example of serving those things? I am not bigger than Jesus. So I am not devoid of any type of those feelings as well. So I wish that Christians would embrace that much more and seek the help that they need to go through those things.
One of the things that I like to tell people is that how do you know that God is not sending you to the therapist?
For sure. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because yeah, Luke was a physician, right?
Yeah.
He was, he had. They all had trades. You know what I mean? It's like, and I tell this to people all the time. It's like mental health is such a taboo thing, but when I hit my shin and I feel that it cracks, I don't say, "Let's not tell anybody that my shin is broken." Like, oh, it hurts so bad, but I'm good. You know what I mean? Like, I
Only
don't
in
tell
professional wrestling.
well, not nowadays. but but the crazy thing is that though, right? It's like,
Yeah.
so if I got into a car accident and my arm's flapping, you know what I mean? Like, I don't be like, oh no, I'm good, I'm fine. Don't
Right.
don't pay attention to me. I'm fine. But your arm's deformed. It looks like you got a compound fracture. Oh no, don't worry about that. I'm good.
You're the Black Knight from Monty Python.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
there
a
you go.
fresh fruit.
And it's like we don't do that when we're sick physically, right? When we feel like when we had COVID, I mean, we went to the hospital and we got ourselves doped up, make sure that that stuff was being relieved. And then we break our leg or we feel it not feeling well and stuff like that. We're just fine. We go see a doctor. We go see a medical doctor. But when our mind is sick, we pretend that it's not. Like, that's backwards to me. Like, just because you can't see it, and a lot of the times the more dangerous stuff is done in silence. It's the things that you don't see, right? Like cancer, for instance. You know what I mean? Like it's heart attacks. It's a silent killer to a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like aneurysms. There's things that are like silent killers, and you don't notice for a long time
Till it's too late.
until it's too late,
And
right?
all this stress from your that you've been bottled up will contribute to all those silent killers.
Absolutely, absolutely. A lot of times, I've dealt with cancer patients. A lot of times when people wish that they noticed some things, and they wish they would have detected it earlier, because then it would have been treatable, a lot more treatable. And it's like, you need to start detecting things early before, and from a mental health standpoint, And it's the same way. You wish that it would have been more treatable, but now you're like deep into addiction. Now you're deep into
Mhm.
depression. But if it would have been treated earlier, there's a good reason, there's a good way that or a good chance that it wouldn't have been that way. So just like physical health and physical sickness is important for us to address mental sickness and mental health the
Mhm.
same way, detect it earlier and get treatment, just as if your arm was broke or you had a migraine. You know what I mean? It's the same type of concept. It's so
Mhm.
taboo because it strokes our ego, and it devalues our reputation. If we're stressed
Mhm.
out or dealing with depression, we've got this reputation to carry. But it's like, screw all that, man. You know what I mean? Are you going to be a people pleaser and saying that you're okay? Or are you going to invest in yourself and your mental health, and knowing that you are contributing to society, especially if you have a family, if you have kids, if you
Mhm.
have a spouse, why in the world would you not want mental health treatment? I'm a father of three. I'm a husband first, and then and then a follower of three, a father of three.
Right.
Why in the world would I have a therapist? I'm a therapist and I have a therapist. Why wouldn't I
Mhm.
want mental health treatment for the optimization of me being a husband and a father? Why wouldn't I want that? And it's important, like, why wouldn't I want to go to the gym to have physical health? Why wouldn't I want to go to a therapist for mental health? It's the same. It's a very comparable set of phenomenon there. And I think it's important for us to focus, not to focus so much on physical health, which is also important, but make sure we balance that with mental health as well.
Right.
And I like the fact that you brought up that the topic of mental health is taboo, and I think that's so true because one of the things that I take away from dealing with depression and stuff is that until it happens to you, you really don't realize what a battle it is, not only for you, but your family and
Yep.
your friends. And I remember, um, I remember when I told my dad about my diagnosis. God rest his soul. And this will probably be a little R-rated, but first thing he said to me was, "What the fuck are you depressed about?" And I was like, "I don't know."
Hmm.
And so you people have their thoughts on it, but until it happens close to home, it serves as a learning as a learning tool, I should
Yep.
say, because not only are you trying to educate yourself, you got to educate those around you too. And my dad and I had a lot of conversations about my depression. And it's like, you know, this is why they prescribe you medication. They call it happy pills because my brain doesn't want to produce enough of the serotonin or dopamine or
Mhm.
whatever. And, so sometimes you just need a little help in that department, and it's not nobody's fault really. And, you know, and I see therapists as well. And um so it's just a whole learning process, and I think until it happens to you or it hits close to home, somebody you know, it can really take you for a ride as
It
far as
can.
that goes.
I agree 100%. I say all the time, people have become confident in their ignorance. And
Mhm.
so it's like, because I don't know it, is because I'm not, I don't understand it. I have like some type of very firm statements, that of what the way I feel about it, until you go through some stuff, right? And so it's like, okay, well, I don't need to go through a therapist. And then,
Mhm.
you're on the brink of divorce, and you're like, oh, who do I call? You know what I mean? And Ghostbusters,
Mhm.
their line is busy, so now you have to call a therapist, right?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and it's like, and then you realize, like, like, man, what was I doing? Like, I was so confident in my ignorance toward my thoughts on mental health and therapy, until I went to therapy, and I'm like, oh man, I was a dud, what I mean, for thinking about this. And I
Mhm.
just felt people, hey, like, if you don't know about it, You know what I mean? Don't be so confident in your ignorance toward it. Ignorance just means not know. That's what the word ignorant means. It means not knowing.
In
And
this
so
case, go
and don't be
ahead.
confident in it. You know what I mean? Just understand. Seek to understand.
In this case, ignorance is not bliss, right?
It's not. It's not. You know, and especially when it comes to mental health, it's not bliss whatsoever.
Mm-mm.
Because it's like you want to know. And as I was having a conversation with someone about like diagnoses and things like that. It's like, so people think of diagnoses as taboo as well. And I don't. I actually think it's a very, very good um, kind of point of understanding. And so when people get diagnosed, I akin it to this. I usually give these examples to people. If Laura was a doctor, or a nurse, because I would see you first before I see a doctor. So if I was seeing a Laura the nurse, right? And so if I come to the emergency room and you come to me and say, "What's wrong?" And I say, "I'm hurting." You'd be like, okay, where?" Are you hurting?
Right.
That's very generic, right?
What's going on?
I'm hurting in my body. Okay, where in your body? My lower body. Um, Thank you, but we need more. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
know I want to know where the treat, where in your lower body. My left leg area. Okay, can you pinpoint it to me specifically where you're hurting in your lower left leg area? Okay, okay, all right. Well, my ankle. Okay, now I can pinpoint where you're hurting to be able to treat it. And that's what a diagnosis is. You know what I mean? I can pinpoint your area of, mental health hurdles to know where to treat it and know what to treat. If everybody goes to the emergency room and say, "I'm hurting," that's not going to do anything. You know what I mean?
No.
That's not, it's like, okay, well, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. Where are you hurting? How long have you been hurting?
Mhm.
They ask those questions. Where do you think it came from? How long have you been hurting? How long have you been
Mhm.
dealing with this? Those are like preliminary questions that they ask. It's the same thing with the diagnosis. If someone's diagnosed with, PTSD, for instance, I hear that. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm super interested in seeing what the trauma is that got you there. Let's deal with that. Let's work on
Right.
that so you can get to the point where you're healed from that, and you feel confident to feel that you've really healed from that thing. Not saying that it might not come back up again, but you're at a standpoint of healing to that. And so when I think of diagnoses, I think, okay, well, let's do the interventions to get you to the point of healing. Just like when
Mhm.
someone goes to emergency room
Right.
and gets said, okay, well, this person has a shin split or something like that. That's a that's a prognosis, right? So the
Mhm.
same thing with the diagnosis. It's just an area for us to work on.
Right, that's a good point because, when I was sick and all those months of not knowing what was wrong with me and sitting there, your mind is going everywhere. Is it
Mhm.
cancer? Is it this? Is it that?
Yep.
And then when we finally got that diagnosis, like you said, I could pinpoint my diet a little bit better.
Mhm.
I was still
Mhm.
in a lot of pain, but I wasn't nearly as bad as I was before.
Yep.
And so, uh, a nephew of mine, I can say this on here because she's put it on her Facebook and stuff. My nephew was diagnosed with Asperger's a couple years ago, and so now that we have that diagnosis, I now know how to talk to my nephew and connect with him in
Yep.
his own special
Mhm.
way. So
Yep.
thank God for diagnosis.
100%. It's because we know how to treat it, right? And we
Mhm.
know how it affects you, right? So there's diagnosis and there's prognosis. And so like the diagnosis is, hey, this is what we're dealing with. This is what, the condition is, and this is how it's going to affect you. And then the treatment is this is how we're going to deal with it. Again, it happens in the medical field all the
Mhm.
time, right? And it's interesting because you want to know what's wrong with you. You want to know, like, okay, something's wrong with my knee. Can I find out what it is to treat it real quick? And can we speed up this process? But when it comes to mental health, oh, I don't want to know that.
Mhm.
I don't want to know. You don't have to tell me that I'm depressed. I mean, you ain't got to give me. Okay, but if I whack you in the foot you're gonna be like, oh, what happened? You know what I mean?
Right.
It's super ironic there.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Unfortunately, Dr. Chris has a hard exit on us, so we are going to have to wrap up our conversation. We will have to have you on again to kind of continue it a little bit. All three of us are kind of, passionate, I guess you would say, in talking about this because
Yep.
all three of us have dealt with it, and Dr. Chris helps people, and thank you so much for the work that you do. Before you leave, is there anything that you would like to plug?
Follow me at Chris Prolific. Follow Sports Kita, multiple shows there a week, and follow my Pancakes and Power Slam show where we just chill on Tuesday nights, 11:40 p.m. Eastern time, and
Hashtag Ask Doc.
there you go. Hashtag Ask Doc. I just do a Q&A. Like I used to, it used to be formatted, but I just do a Q&A, for an hour or so and just chill because I'm doing so many other formatted shows.
Yeah.
So I just chill. I start off with a freestyle. I end it with an auto-tune song. Typically, we just have a great time. So go follow
Yep.
Pancakes and Power Slams.
Good stuff over there.
Thank
I'm
you.
definitely glad you came on. This was such a good conversation, and I think I even learned a few things from this. So again, I thank you for coming on. I thank you for everything that you've done for us, done for the wrestling community, and definitely, best of luck to you because you're a jack of all trades and you do amazing at every single one of them.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's always humbling hearing that. I'm a sucker for compliments. They'll never expire to me. They'll never get stale. And it's also glory to God. And I'm just
Yeah.
a humble servant.
Yeah.
I just love people and I'm a humble servant. So thank you so much.
Well,
You're
amen to that.
welcome.
As always, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Peaches and Powerbombs. You know the drill. Like, share, subscribe, all that jazz right here. And we'll see you later, you lovely peaches. Bye. Good night, sweet peach. It's time to go. Good night, sweet peach. It's the end of the show. We hate to leave, but we really can't stay. So good night, sweet peach. Good night.